Hey guys, we're here for episode 17 of the E-commerce Opportunity Podcast, where I'm joined by Austin. Austin, how are you?
Hey Chase, I'm good, man. I'm excited to be here.
Dude, I'm pumped for you to be here. Do you mind starting out by what you're working on?
Uh, yeah, man. So my big project, the thing that I'm super passionate about is it's called Brand Growth Experts, and we help e-commerce entrepreneurs build six, seven, and eight-figure businesses that they can sell, and we help them do it in a way that allows them to continue to live their life and have a like build something that's incredibly valuable without burning themselves out. So that's my big passionate project, the thing that I'm most excited about. We've got about 300 e-commerce entrepreneurs in our community. And every couple of months, we run something called Intentional Wealth, which is a cohort-based program to help business e-commerce founders get a handle on their business, get clarity on where they need to, like what they need to do to grow, and then also just make friends with other people in the industry. So we do a lot of curation of on experiences and the people in that program to make it really impactful.
That's awesome, dude. I want to talk about that in 1 second, but before I do, I want to talk about like your journey. I know we were talking before this. You mentioned that you had an agency for a period of time. Can we talk about like what services you offered there, and like some of the things that you liked, disliked, and maybe some of your learnings?
Yeah, man. So I built an e-commerce email marketing agency quite a few years ago. I mentioned this, but the way I got into the e-commerce space was I was working at a startup in Los Angeles called Human Healthy Vending. We were putting healthy vending machines into schools, hospitals, places, all companies as well, all over the country. And we were growing incredibly fast. It was a franchise opportunity, and we would sell big, high-ticket, $100,000 franchises through email marketing. And I was building those emails, sitting right next to the CMO, the co-founder, and I was just like building all these emails in Infusionsoft. We grew to like $12 million in 2 years from basically nothing with one salesperson. I was like, this is incredible. Email automation is the most powerful thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I had a friend who was started a company called Blender's Eyewear. And I was like, dude, I can do what I'm doing for this other company for you. That was my first client in like the e-commerce space. I would drive down to San Diego. I slept on a mattress in his house for like a month and a half while I built out all their email and all their automations. It's like early days of Blender's Eyewear. Um, and from that, the next client was Pure Vita Bracelets, who was right next to them. And I did the exact same thing, and I built out all their email automations. At the time, Klaviyo didn't even really exist, so we were using Infusionsoft, and I just learned about Klaviyo because I just met the founders, and that's how I got started in this. And that I kind of accidentally built an agency because at the time, very few people were doing any email automations in e-commerce, and so that led to like one referral after another, after another, after another, after another. And it was soon enough I had this agency that we were running where we were installing different email automation and doing some campaigns, mostly email automation, and it was very cool. We worked with a bunch of like really fast growing D2C brands that you probably have, most people have heard of today, like Movement Watches. Yeah, I say accidentally because it was not my intention to build an agency. I definitely didn't have any idea like what I was doing. It was just kind of fulfilling demand. And I built, what I learned from that experience was there is something to be said about building something intentionally and like building something that you want. I felt like I was always fighting against this thing that was happening because I was like, well, we just keep getting more clients, and I didn't have, all of my like financials figured out about how to make this thing feasible long term. So there was like boom bust type environment, and that went. I had a business partner that it wasn't his vision either of where we wanted to go. So after about 3-4 years, we split it up and I shut it down and I moved in a different direction, but learned a ton, had a ton of fun, got to be involved in growth at some incredibly fast growing companies. And, uh, and yeah, man, I feel like that was just like a trial by fire, and I learned so much from that whole experience.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So how much time was in between you kind of shutting down the agency and you starting like the coalition and kind of like the intentional well? How much time was in between that and what was the inspiration behind starting kind of like this community and this membership?
So it kind of went in steps. What was interesting is after I had the agency, one of the things that frustrated me the most about the running the agency, the email marketing agency, was the time it would take from signing a contract to getting things up and running, right? Like my frustration was that it would take 3 months, and most of that frustration, most of that time was spent trying to interface with the client and get the client on calls to be able to like to be able to get things done. So instead, I said, you know what, I'm going to flip this on its head. I'm going to start a workshop where 10 people can come in and we'll build all the emails in 2 days. And I had people I actually like flew people from Klaviyo down to the workshop, had like technical people there. And in 2 days, we would get the work that would take us 90 days to get done as an agency done. And we get people up to speed running emails. That was my first email intensives. It was actually the inspiration for Klaviyo workshops. There was for a while Klaviyo workshops were happening where they're traveling around hosting them. That was directly inspired by the fact that I was hosting those before they were even like that was I flew the people from Klaviyo down. It's like, hey, you got to get connected to your customers here because we've got tons of people who want to use your product, and it's clunky at the time. It was very, very clunky. And so they came down, learned a lot, went back, and they started building all like the flow library, all this sort of stuff. So that was 4 years ago, I think, about time when I was doing that. And that was a really cool, I still enjoy doing those type of events. The challenge with that is that it's like you do the event and then it's over, and then you have to like sell tickets to the next event. And there was no like ongoing relationship. And as you know from e-commerce and building a business, it's all about pressure over time. It's not like building a successful e-commerce business is about the day in and day out improvements. So we would get people ahead quite a bit with this workshop, and then it was like, okay, well then now we have no way to stay connected with them. And so after about a year and a half of doing that, I was feeling like kind of burned out, as well as like, oh man, I'm always launching these things and they're fun, but I need to find something else to stay connected with people. So I launched the Coalition, which is my community. And that kind of worked really, really well with my people who would come to events, because then they could stay together, stay connected, ask questions, learn, and we could do training ongoing. And so that was about two years ago, I believe. It was 2 years ago that I launched the Coalition, and that has been incredibly successful community that we have, like training, coaching, all this different things to be able to help people grow their business and do it consistently over time.
Dude, that's awesome. I love that. So how do you acquire like paying members and then how do you retain paying members like of this community?
So the biggest driver has been my podcast, the E-commerce Influence podcast. I've been hosting it for about maybe 7.5 years, and have a pretty substantial audience all around the world. And so, and my podcast is for e-commerce entrepreneurs, and that's the exact same audience that my community is for. So most of the people have found me through the podcast, or maybe my appearances on other podcasts like this one.
Yeah.
That's the main attractor for it, or referrals, right? They join and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I'm learning so much, and they ask their friend, and that allows them to go through the application process a lot easier because they get referred in. So that's the place that I probably get the most people from, is definitely the podcast. How do I keep people around? So that is the most interesting thing and the most challenging thing about building a community-based business, a community and a recurring business, And I've learned so much about that. Like from when I started to when I launched was 30 days. And I had a really good mentor, somebody who I'd worked. I was with a guy named James Schramko, who really helped me get things up and running. And it was just like get launched with a little bit of content and then improve and evolve over time. I think building a community is very much like building software. It's iterations over time. So the biggest thing that we do is we listen to our members and we see what they want and we build it. And that has led us to change up the community in so many different ways. It's a lot. We get like back and forth feedback about the type of trainings that people want. So if somebody's like, "Hey, I'm interested in YouTube advertising," I'll go and I'll find the best YouTube advertiser in the world and I'll bring them in and I'll have them do a training that's about an hour long, and it's designed to give people the ability to like get stuff done. Like my criticism of a lot of training is that it's not actionable. So we try to do things where we're like, okay, you got 50 minutes, give people something they can do in 2 hours to move their business forward. And so that's really the main thing around how to retain members. It's just building the features that they want and also building a community that people know each other, right? And it can be kind of lonely for a lot of people who are building a business in isolation or in a silo. So connecting relationships and that's a good way to retain members.
That's awesome. So on the personal brand side, so the podcast has been huge. You've been doing it for a long time, and I'm sure it's had some nice steady growth. Outside the podcast, like what other channels are you personally on, and how do those channels contribute to the growth of the membership or just you getting people on the podcast in general?
So other channels that I'm on Twitter. I think that's probably where I have the like potentially largest audience. I would say that I have an email marketing, like a newsletter that goes out every single Thursday that talks about what's going on in the industry. It shares my thoughts, lessons, tools, tips. Those are probably the two other things outside the podcast that I do the most. I've gone and spoke at most every conference that is out there for e-commerce. But for the time being, those are the things that I've been focused on. I think people do find me on Twitter, but most of it's honestly from the podcast. A lot of my time is spent working with clients. That's one of the interesting things about my entire business is like a recurring model. So for me, I spend a lot of time just delivering value for current clients, and then that continues the snowball rolling forward. And if people, I'm fortunate to get a lot of referrals for our programs, and that's where a lot of that comes from. A lot of the growth comes from that.
Nice, that makes sense. I have one more question on kind of what you're doing there, and then I want to talk about kind of the team, and then really this topic around like how you get businesses from 6 to 8 figures. My last question on this one is in terms of like the intentional wealth. Is that a program within the coalition, or is that something separate? And what is it? How long have you been doing it for? How's it going?
Yeah. So it's a program that's separate. It's for business owners, like e-commerce founders that are doing over $500,000 in revenue. Most people end up there in the low to mid 7 figures. Is kind of our sweet spot for the people in that program. It's a cohort-based program, and we launched it this year. So the first cohort kicked off this year. We had 20 members, and the real goal with that program is to help people in the program get really, really clear about what they need to do to get to the next level in their business and their life. So it's like getting clear about where you actually want to go, and then getting help and getting the shortcuts to be able to get there faster. And that could be from working with people. We have like a board of advisors that works with our members. That it's an email marketing coach, a Facebook marketing coach, a mindset and performance coach, and a copywriter. And it's like the goal is to really identify those things that are holding you back. And a lot of those are actually internal, right? Like it may not just be something that you're struggling with on the marketing side. It could be actually like your mindset about like your business and what you want or what you think might be holding you back, stories that are telling yourself. And so we get super clear on that and then try to move things forward and knock out all of those things holding you back from up leveling in your business and your life.
That's so cool, man. That's awesome. So you have two businesses. There's a lot of components within each business. Like, what does your team look like, right? So it's you, and then who else is on your team to make these businesses possible?
Yeah. So I have a couple people on my team. I've got a couple full-time employees. One who is a uh, community manager and somebody who also really manages operations on for both of the programs. We'll bring in experts, help me coordinate trainings, that sort of a thing. And then I also have another person who focuses mostly on like honestly like project management and helping us move big projects forward. We have a small full-time team, and then we've got some contractors as well: podcast editors, video editors, graphic designers. That's what the team looks like. But yeah, the thing that I think is one of the most important parts, the most valuable parts of my business is getting clear and then moving projects forward. So we work with Scrum methodology. So we're a small team, so we'll get really clear on what we want to build and what we want to ship, and then we'll map it out, and then we'll run a sprint for 2 to 3 weeks where we all dive in and build something on the website.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to purposely leave this next question kind of open-ended, and I know that you got excited about this when we were chatting before. Can we talk through like how do you take a business from 6 figures to 8 figures?
Yeah, so I'll specifically talk about my experience with e-commerce businesses and brands. I'll say that most of my time and energy has been spent coaching e-commerce entrepreneurs who have grown to 6 or 7 figures and are wanting to get to 8 figures. And I think what is the things that I've seen in this space and the things that usually make the difference between someone getting to the next level or not come down to like first mindset and two, like when and what they're doing. And specifically like when, because I think the thing that I'll start with what I think holds people back and where I spend a lot of my time. It's what I've seen is that often someone will launch a product and they'll have some initial traction and some success. And that could get them to like maybe $500,000 in sales a year. Right. And that's super exciting. And that is an incredible breakthrough and an incredible milestone to hit. And that milestone usually comes with some additional baggage or some additional challenges. And the challenges that usually hit around that level, it usually start with like the desire to do a lot more and to start focusing on all these different things. I think one of the biggest challenges, especially for new business owners, is not being able to separate what is going to move the needle and what is just like marketing noise. And so at that range, it's really like, how do you get clear on what you need to be doing right now and what you need to be doubling down on to be able to get to the next level? Let's say you have, and this is where you kind of have to determine about product. So if it's a product that has a large market and a lot of, right now, there are so many products that in the past might have seemed niche, but the world is so big that they could actually be pretty large, right? Like just a paleo coffee or a paleo tea or something like that, or some type of paleo food or keto food can be a mass market. So if you have something that can go to the mass market, then often what you're doing at that stage is like really doubling and tripling down on what has gotten you to where you're at and building a system to the marketing that you're doing can be done consistently, effectively, and without you as the founder being intimately involved in every aspect of it, because your role is going to change and you're going to be fighting all these different fires and hiring people and growing. So you really want to figure out how to systematize and make repeatable, effective marketing. And that will usually get you from like 6 to 7 figures. And that's kind of where I see my first challenge is like often it comes in super scattered. They're like, well, we are, we send out emails every once in a while. We run Facebook campaigns, but it's not systematized. That's usually the first challenge. At 7 figures, and again, these are all, I hate throwing out these numbers because it's all different for each business, depending on, I'm just going to give some massive generalizations here. At a certain point, right, like you'll get to a level where you now need to, during that phase, you kind of typically will have to hire people that do things that you're not good at. And that may be, you may be really good at marketing, so you need to hire somebody who's really good at operations to help you keep things moving forward. Or you might be really good at operations and you're struggling with marketing, so you have to hire somebody who's excellent at marketing to get you to the next level. The step from like 7 to 8 figures, usually I see, again, generalizations. It's like starts to be time where you need to hire for things that you are really good at. And that can be a really challenging thing. If you're a founder and you're excellent at Facebook advertising, and that's how you've grown, to be able to let go of that and have somebody take over the thing that is most important to your business can be incredibly challenging. Now, I can see a lot of people get hung up at that point, but it's important because it gets you to the next level where you can start doing the things that really matter, which is like bringing in incredibly high quality talent, recruiting, working on organization structure, or developing new products, which is something that I think can get lost somewhere on that journey. Big hiccups for people that get from 6 to 7 figures. They may hit a knockout product that gets them like to 7 figures, and they just keep going back to the well too long without rolling out another product, when the best thing that they could do is not make their marketing more effective, it's launch something new to the same audience.
Man, that was so good. Thank you for that. That was great. I actually have two more questions I just thought about. Right
Sure.
now, you have a community. Let's say you can't start a community again. You have to go start a business. Would you start an agency? Would you start an e-commerce brand, or would you go freelance? And why?
I would definitely, I would definitely start either, I'd buy an e-commerce brand. That'd be where I'd focus. A couple of things that I'm thinking about. One, it's buying e-commerce brands buying or partnering with e-commerce brands that don't have the same skill set that I have and helping them grow. One of I would consider my skill set the ability to retain customers and boost profits in a business. So finding a company that has really good acquisition, buying it or partnering with it and helping them grow, or starting a company from scratch in the health space. Those are the things that I'm most excited about. I think also the other thing I would probably, if I was to start something in the health space, the way I would do it is I would start a company that partners with, I'm going to say, influencers or celebrities to help them create their own brands and leverages the audience that they have and do all the like back end work and let them take on top of funnel type acquisition stuff.
That's killer. I love that. I thought a lot about that as well. So thank you for that. And then the other question I have is like in your business or even like in the e-commerce businesses that you have in the community, like what are some of like the tools that you guys can't live without?
Sure, that's a great question. I will preface this by saying that I think oversaturating your website with apps is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. And if you have a ton of apps and you're a person who loves to like try to install Shopify apps, go back and delete and actually clean out the code from all the ones that you're not using, because it can slow down your website. With that said, I will share some ones that I really like. I think the one that is, I would, if I only had like one app, it would be Klaviyo. And I would use that to be able to capture the information from all my customers and follow up with them. By far, I think the best email marketing app, and also rolling out really strong SMS offerings as well. Let's see here. From a project management side, I use Monday.com, Slack. I also use Airtable. Those are the three things that we use. I do zero communication internally through email marketing or through email. It's all through Slack or Monday. Airtable is one of my favorite apps. It's incredibly powerful. We use it for everything from reporting to recruiting to it's our CRM as well for the business. And I just think it's so flexible and so interesting, and I'm a huge fan. From the e-commerce side, I would say some apps that I really like. One like Recart, some sort of an upsell app, depending on what I have, what my product is, like orderbump.io or CartHook or one click upsell. They all have their own uses, and it depends on what type of product you've got and like what your business model is. I think that's one thing that really is I would look at first before installing a bunch of apps. There's actually, those are the ones that come to me off the top of my head, just from the marketing side of things. I probably could go on a little bit longer, but there's actually a thread that we have in the coalition of people posting their Shopify stacks. And it's pretty interesting to see. One that, is exciting is somebody was really pumped about Supermetrics. I haven't used it, but I've heard it's quite interesting, quite cool.
Yeah, dude, those were killers. Thank you for that. The last question I have, you could answer, it's going to be a two-part question. You can answer either part. One is, what do you think the biggest challenges that your brands face? Or two, like, what do you think the biggest need of an app or technology for those customers in facing that problem would be? You can answer either or both of those questions. So the biggest problem that you think people face, or like the biggest need that these people have that could be an app in the Shopify store that isn't already or that you haven't seen.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge that they face is hiring quality talent, quality people. Like, I think that is a lot of my attention has moved in that direction because it's something that I've seen consistently with my clients is like, as they grow and they grow very, very quickly, finding quality people to work in their business that are talented, have a little bit of a background, and recruiting. So that's definitely one that is top of mind and a big challenge. From a technology side of things, it's a good question. Like, what would be a good app? So attribute another app I'll share is Inquire app, which is an app that allows you to put a post-purchase survey and ask people where they heard about you. The biggest challenge people face is attribution, and it's been that way. It will continue to be that way for a long, long, long time, and that's where I think the most money is. That's why you see so many attribution type apps being built, is because nobody's done it in a way that is that effective. And so that's interesting, as well as just like apps that can help you figure out your lifetime value, repeat purchase rate, all those types of things, and like create actionable metrics that allow you to be able to spend advertising more effectively.
Yeah, those are great answers. I honestly could not agree more. And I have one final question. I lied.
For
My
sure,
final
man.
question would be, how do you think about like a brand? Let's say you can pick 6, 7, 8 figure brand. How do you think about like when and where it makes sense for those brands to hire internal versus leverage a freelancer or an agency? Like, who does it make sense for? Or do you think there are certain things that you should outsource versus certain things you didn't? Take this any way you want to go with it.
Cool. I have lots of opinions on this, actually. It's a great question. So I think let's break it up into two parts. I'm going to first start with acquisition. right? And when I say acquisition, I'm going to say this: there's multiple facets of acquisition, but I'll start by talking about like paid social, for example. And I think if you're spending under $2,000 a month, well, that's like your budget. Like you're not going to be able to find an agency that's going to help you. It's not going to work. So you'll probably be, and you're not going to have enough money to spend to bring in anybody full time. So you're going to be in a position of having a freelancer, and that could be really, really helpful, especially if you have a freelancer who is somebody who you could pay to help train you. Like a coach freelancer is like an awesome fit early on. And I also think it's important to remember to ask yourself, what type of business are you in? People make this assumption. They're like, Procter and Gamble, they're a huge company. They use agencies, so we can use an agency as well. The difference between Procter and Gamble and a direct-to-consumer brand is if you're a direct-to-consumer brand, you're a marketing company. That's what you are. Procter and Gamble is not a marketing company. They're a product company, and that's why they hire agencies to help them do their marketing. So if you ask yourself the question, what are we truly? What is the ethos of this business? Are we a marketing company or are we a product company? And if you're a marketing company, at a certain point in your life cycle, you're most likely going to have to transition to bring marketing services that are brand related in-house. That may be on the paid social side, that's going to be creative, right? Creative is one of the most challenging things to outsource at any level, really, but especially as you grow and if you truly are a brand that is set less like a lifestyle brand, you're probably going to struggle having creative outsourced at a high level. So you'll probably need to bring that in. You can keep media buying outsourced for a pretty long time, to the point where I've seen like the actual media buying being outsourced until people are at like 8 figures or like high 7 figures. On the Google, like if you're, and again, the other question that I have to ask is, are you demand generation or demand capture business? If you're demand generation, meaning you need to go out there and advertise, you're going to probably need people who, you're going to need more emphasis and more expertise to be successful on that than on the demand capture side, where you might be able to have somebody who's just like an expert at Google AdWords work as a freelancer or consultant for you until you're in mid 7 figures. On the retention side of things, I think where it can be really challenging is I generally like to keep email marketing in-house after a certain point. I think it can be really effective to work with an agency or a freelancer to get you up to speed. But at a certain point, if you're the one sending out campaign emails over and over again, it can become cost prohibitive to work with an agency that charges you per email, especially if you get to a level where you need to send 3 to 4 emails, like say 2 to 3 emails a week. Well, at that point, if you're at that level, I think you should have somebody in-house doing that, because the returns you're going to get on that are going to be really, really high. And it'll be challenging to make that work. I think it's even challenging to make that work from an agency perspective, just because of the amount of work going into it and the amount people are willing to pay for campaign emails over time. So that's kind of my take on it. And if you are going to partner with an agency, it can work incredibly well, only if you have a long-term vision of win-win for everybody. Like if you're thinking about hiring an agency for a short term, like a year, it's going to fail. Like you really need to think about, if you're going to hire agencies long-term, you want somebody in-house who's going to be the liaison between you and the agency, and the one who's helps keep agencies responsible for their metrics and communicates to an agency what they need so that they can be as connected to your business as possible, and allows you to so that they can have success, right? The biggest reason that agencies fail with clients, I think, has to do with the fact that a client not giving agencies enough connection to the business or keeping them up to speed, and having expectations that they're going to produce like an in-house person, even though they're not connected to the brand. So If you're thinking long term, you need to have somebody in house that could manage one, two, or maybe even three channels, but has to have experience in all of those to be able to have success.
Wow, what a fantastic answer. Great way to end this. Thank you, Austin, so much for being here. Best place for someone to join Coalition, follow you, email you, whatever they want to do based off the info that you shared. What
For
is
sure.
that or what are those?
So if you want to become a member of or like work with me, you can go to brandgrowthexperts.com, and there's all information about working together. And then I have a podcast called the E-commerce Influence Podcast. Been hosting it for probably about 7 years. There are anybody you could imagine in the e-commerce space that you think of and probably look up to in terms of building brands. I've probably interviewed at some point. So you can go check it out. It's E-commerce Influence Podcast or ecommerceinfluence.com. Chase, thank you so much, man, for having me on.
Of course, you're the man. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Cheers, Austin.